The Quacks by Anahisa Aguilar, Bailey Felber, Shannon Grimes, and Sharman Pitts. So I wrote about the Clockwork Universe. So the Clockwork Universe had many historians involved in Newton's law of motion. It explains what the Clockwork Universe was back in the day. Newton was a legend in the science world. He influenced many people and led them to explore greater into Earth. Many people went further investigating their galaxy and discovered new things. Newton's vision of a clockwork universe served scientists for a century after him. So the Clockwork Universe is one of the most persistent and pervasive myths in the history of science. It is recognized by most informed historians of science, but not by wider public. The myth of the Clockwork Universe is applied to Newton with many and several components, such as the universe is like a machine or clockwork mechanism. So who would have thought that the American Revolution was not the only important American War of Independence, but what few people know about is that the Newtonian Revolution, in which the world we live in now, back in the day, few people had heard about this. So the Clockwork Universe is one of the most persistent and pervasive, like I had mentioned before. There was another myth known that God created the cosmos and set it in motion, but no longer is involved. So, as I said before, there were many historians that wanted to be the Newton of their subject. There were some that wanted to be Newton economics. There was some that wanted to be Newtons of medicine. There was also some that wanted to be Newton of social and political reform. So with that being said, Newton attracted many followers, which they called themselves Newtonians. So these people used Newton's impressive insights in mathematics, physics, astronomy, and optics. Newton's reputation was held by the poet, novelist, and man of letters Voltaire. So this is Voltaire, 1697 to 1778. This unlikely advocate's most famous creation was the lovable creation of Candide. This person had a great philosophy of the world that God created must be the best possible one. Voltaire was a person who was very impressed by Newton's things such as the freedom of speech. He was impressed by this because back in France, Voltaire was imprisoned for disparaging the Catholic Church and the French king. Even after all this happened, Voltaire knew how much freedom of speech was important to him and other people surrounding him. Voltaire wrote a book about Newton's ideas for ordinary people. He wrote this book in France, and he did this because he admired and appreciated Newton's achievements. This was a book that had many people in France talking about because of Newton's mathematics and physics. They were talking about this also because it was starting to make sense about the movements of the planets and stars. So, that being said, his reputation grew as Newton had explained both mathematical and physical in his famous Principia. So, he had stated that there are 3 examples that include the tides, the shape of the Earth, and the number and the orbits of the planets in the solar system. So a tide is the rise and fall of sea levels caused by the combined effects of the gravitational forces exerted by the moon and the sun, and also the rotation of Earth. The tides have a regular pattern, and this was important to know so the sailors could know when a high tide was needed to get the ship into harbor. So gravitational pull was Newton's key because he believed it was the greatest when the moon is closest to the earth? So many people did not believe on the shape and how big Earth was. And this made French scientists go out and send people to measure the longitude and latitude of the Earth. It took some of the scientists about 9 years and some less or more. So the conclusion of the measuring had led Newton's reputation increase in continental Europe. All of these predictions had led astronomers to observe Earth more closely and to also pay more attention to the stars and galaxy. The number of observers had increased due to mathematical analysis increment. This is where the telescopes came handy, and more astronomers discovered new stars and even galaxies. This is William Herschel, 1738 to 1822. This man was a musician who discovered the planet Uranus and also one of the persons involved in building the world's largest telescope. His sister Caroline would also help in observing the galaxy, and also his son John continued the observations, making it a family business. In my opinion, I think it's amazing what this guy did. When the universe was still in creation, William would not only look at the stars, but also he would think deeply about what he was seeing, such as the planets and other heavenly bodies. There were times where William had to prove astronomers wrong about the clusters of stars. He also observed the Milky Way further into detail and realized it was not the only one in the universe. He also had a great advantage when he observed the universe, of course, because of his invention of the telescope.